Sometimes I think reality is just thin ice over a bottomless black expanse of water. We walk on it every day, confident in its strength until one day you hear it crack. My job is to stand by that crack with a gaff hook and stop whatever crawls out from the depths from dragging unsuspecting folks down. Sometimes I succeed. Sometimes I remember the eyes of the girl from the Whispering House case. She looked at me like she knew I was too late, that the ice beneath her had given way long ago. Memories like that are cracks too, just inside you, and they never fully heal. Chapter 1. Lycanthrope. My name is David Chen. On paper, I'm a senior data analyst in the Statistical Analysis and Forecasting Division of the Metropolitan Police Department. Sounds as dreary as my desk looks, piled high with papers nobody will ever read. This is my cover story, my front. A convenient, faceless lie wrapped in thick layers of bureaucratic cotton wool. In reality, my job isn't about charts and spreadsheets. My work is what hides in the shadows of those charts, in the statistical anomalies, in the deviations blamed on mass hysteria or bad drugs. I'm an operative for the Special Hazards Operations Command. Shock. We're ghosts in the system. A deep cover unit, funded by black budgets and invisible to 99% of the police force, let alone civilians. Only a handful at the very top know we exist: the chief of police, a couple of trusted deputies, the mayor, though he gets fed a heavily redacted version. Officially, we don't exist. Unofficially, we're the city's last line of defense against what doesn't fit into criminology textbooks. Paranormal threats, entities from other dimensions. Urban legends come to life. Everything that makes a regular cop's hair stand on end and their service weapon feel like a child's toy. When patrol officers stumble onto something really wild, something that makes no sense whatsoever, a code phrase goes out over the radio. Most often it's Code Black. Sometimes a direct but encrypted request for shock consultation. That's our signal. Patrol is ordered to secure the perimeter and wait for FBI specialists or a hazmat team. Classic cover stories: gas leak. Or suspect under the influence of an unknown psychotropic substance, exhibiting inhuman strength. Sometimes, if it happens on the outskirts, we can blame it on an aggressive animal attack. A rabid puma in the middle of the metropolis? Sure, why not? If it helps preserve the population's fragile sanity. The rules of the game at Shock are simple and brutal. First and foremost, secrecy. No one must know, ever. Information leaks are punished, let's just say very severely. Second, neutralize the threat. At any cost. We don't take prisoners unless there's a direct order or the subject has unique research value. Our job is to stop the threat here and now. Third, sanitation. Cleaning the scene until it's sterile. No traces, no evidence, no questions. We erase reality's mistakes, patching the cracks on the thin ice of sanity. It's a thankless job, but someone has to do it. My partner is Marcus Thorne. A shock legend, though nobody knows it. Gray-haired, perpetually grumpy veteran with a face like an old battle map. Every scar tells a story you're better off not asking about. He's been with the command since time immemorial, seen things that still make my blood run cold even when he's just recounting reports. A walking encyclopedia of horrors with his ever-present 8-gauge shotgun modified for our needs. He's the brute force and the experience of generations of hunters. I'm tactics, analysis, and knowledge of modern protocols. We complement each other. Mostly he grumbles about my paper-pushing meticulousness, and I roll my eyes at his shoot first, ask if it has papers later approach. But in the field, we're a well-oiled machine. Our bestiary, as we call it in our internal database, is extensive. Not all ghosts are harmless. Some are true predators, feeding on fear or life force. Some inanimate objects gain malevolent will over time, turning into deadly traps. And then there are those who were once human, or still are sometimes. Poltergeists, shadow entities, vampiric aberrations, the possessed. The list is long, but lycanthropes, werewolves, they're a special category. Major league danger. Primal, uncontrollable fury, animal cunning multiplied by human intellect, and incredible physical power. Every encounter with them is a dance with death at high speed. Tonight's shift was dragging on like molasses. Paperwork, equipment checks, another argument with Thorne about the merits of different tactical flashlight models. The usual routine, lulling vigilance to sleep. I was just finishing my third lukewarm coffee of the evening when the silence in our quasi-office bunker was shattered by the crackle of the old radio on Thorne's desk. We use a separate encrypted frequency. The dispatcher's voice was tense, almost breaking. "Base, all patrols. Code Black, Oak Creek area, Maple Street, number 14. Patrol Unit 307 unresponsive. Repeat, 307 unresponsive. Last contact pursuing suspicious individual. Requesting immediate shock consultation. Repeat, requesting shock." Thorne and I locked eyes. There was no surprise in his gaze. Only that familiar, heavy weariness and a sparked flicker of readiness. My heart skipped a beat, then started hammering, pumping adrenaline through my veins. The night had just stopped being slow. It had bared its teeth. We rose silently. Time to swap office jackets for Kevlar and silver. The drive to Oak Creek took about 15 minutes. Our van an inconspicuous dark gray Ford that looks like a regular work vehicle for some repair crew. But beneath the modest shell are armored panels, reinforced suspension, a souped-up engine, and a full suite of shock equipment. Thorne was behind the wheel, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He was silent, eyes fixed on the road, but I could see he was already there mentally, at the scene. Beside him, on the passenger seat, lay his trusty Remington 870, modified for silver buckshot. I sat in the back among the equipment racks, running through the action protocols for a Code Black with possible involvement of an aggressive bio-threat class, werewolf. What did we have on lycanthropies in this sector? The shock database offered scant information. A couple of unconfirmed reports of a wolf too large in the last 6 months. One homeless person disappearing a month ago near the Oak Creek Park area. Nothing concrete. That was bad. Uncertainty is the worst enemy in our line of work, right after the creature itself. We pulled up to Maple Street. Even from a distance, we could see the blue and red pulse of police lights lazily cutting through the night darkness. The street was blocked off by several patrol cars. The officers standing at the cordon looked pale and clearly spooked. One very young cop was smoking nervously, dropping ash on his uniform. The air was thick and heavy. It smelled of gunpowder, so there had been shooting. And something else. Something primal, wild. A sharp, musky scent of a predator, mixed with the nauseatingly sweet, coppery smell of fresh blood. I knew that smell. It always heralded bad news. We flashed our fake federal agent credentials and were waved through the tape without question. The scene beyond made even Thorne curse quietly under his breath. The patrol car, the very same 307, sat askew in the middle of the street, or what was left of it. It looked like it had been chewed on by a giant beast. Doors ripped clean off their hinges, roof caved in, windshield shattered into 1,000 pieces. The metal bodywork was scored with deep gouges like from enormous claws. The asphalt around the car was slick with blood. Dark, viscous pools glistened in the flashing lights. Signs of a furious struggle were everywhere. Scattered casings from service weapons, scraps of police uniform, a dash cam ripped from its mount. One of the officers lay near the car's rear wheel. His body, God, it was better not to see it at all. What had been done to him defied description within the bounds of polite language and human understanding. Torn wounds, shattered bones. I turned away, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. The second officer was nowhere to be seen. Vanished? Dragged off? Thorne didn't waste time. His usually grumpy voice became hard and commanding. "Everyone back! Expand the perimeter to 2 blocks. Nobody in, nobody out. Experimental chemical leak from a damaged container. We're working in protective gear. The FBI is en route. They'll take control of the scene." Standard lies, but right now they sounded like a saving grace to the terrified cops. They scrambled to obey, glad to be further away from this nightmare. I pulled out our field evidence kit. First up, the UV scanner. On the torn metal of the patrol car, besides the bloodstains, strange, pale, yellow residual glows appeared. Not blood. Something else. Saliva? Some kind of biological discharge? Analysis would tell. The anomalous electromagnetic field detector went haywire near certain areas, especially where the scratches were deepest. This indicated the presence of a powerful biofield, uncharacteristic of ordinary creatures from our world. Then I saw them. The tracks. Huge paw prints on the asphalt where the blood hadn't yet obscured them. Too big for a wolf or a large dog. 5 toes. But the shape, animalistic, with clear impressions of inhumanly long claws. The claws had left deep furrows not only in the car's metal, but also in the asphalt itself, tearing out chunks of pavement. And fur. Clumps of coarse, gray-brown fur were snagged on the sharp edges of the torn metal. I carefully collected several samples with tweezers into sterile containers. Thorne came over, breathing heavily. He stared at the tracks for a long moment, then looked up at the sky, where the nearly full moon dimly pushed through the city's light pollution. He turned to me, grim certainty in his eyes. 2 nights till the full moon, Chen. Looks like we've got a classic on our hands, damn it. Prep the mobile lab. Need to know exactly what we're dealing with. A chill ran down my spine, despite the thick body armor under my jacket. A classic in our world meant only one thing: maximum primal violence, minimal chance of a peaceful resolution, and a very, very long night. A night that was just beginning. Our van isn't just transport, it's a mobile command center and lab on wheels. The rear compartment is a sterile chaos of monitors, analytical equipment, weapon racks, and containers of special gear. While Thorne coordinated the cover operation over a secure line and debriefed the senior officer on the perimeter, more accurately gave him instructions disguised as debriefing, I immersed myself in the work. The atmosphere inside the van contrasted sharply with the bloody chaos outside. The quiet hum of servers, the sterile smell of antiseptics, the steady glow of screens. I carefully placed the fur samples and the swab taken from a uniform scrap, likely saliva, into the biochemical analyzer. The machine whirred to life, beginning the complex process of DNA sequencing and spectral analysis. Simultaneously, I uploaded the track photos to the computer, running a comparison against our extensive shock database. The database is our collective memory, a chronicle of encounters with the unexplained, constantly updated. It holds data on hundreds of threat types, their physiology, behavior, vulnerabilities. While the analyzer worked, I opened the lycanthropy section. The information on screen was dry, procedural, but behind every point lay someone's life, someone's pain, someone's final moments. Lycanthropy, according to the Shock database, isn't a Hollywood fairy tale about cursed aristocrats howling at the moon in tuxedos. Forget the instantaneous, almost painless transformations under a full moon. The reality is far dirtier and more terrifying. It's a violent, agonizing process of organism restructuring at the cellular level. Bones break and reset. Muscles tear and regrow. Skin splits to make way for coarse hide. The nature of infection. The database said it varied. Some cases were clearly viral, transmitted through bites or deep scratches. Others were hereditary, a curse passed down through generations. There were also ritualistic forms tied to dark cults. Judging by the extreme aggression, lack of discernible intelligent behavior, and the level of destruction at the initial contact point, our current client was likely a newbie, recently infected, yet to learn control over the beast within, or the victim of some botched ritual. Those are the most dangerous. Pure, unbridled rage. Physical characteristics. Inhuman strength, capable of tearing steel with bare hands or claws. Speed and agility surpassing any Olympic athlete. Astonishing endurance. But the main problem, regeneration. Minor wounds, even bullet wounds from standard calibers, heal almost instantly. Major damage takes longer but still mends with frightening speed. This makes them incredibly hard to neutralize with standard means. Senses, smell, hearing, night vision, all amplified manifold. They can smell a drop of blood a block away, hear a heartbeat through a wall, see in total darkness as clearly as in daylight. This makes them perfect predators, especially in the urban jungle labyrinth. Intellect. This is what distinguishes them from mere beasts. Even in a state of complete animalistic frenzy, somewhere deep inside, a part of human cunning remains, remnants of memory and tactical thinking. They can learn, avoid obvious traps, set ambushes, use the environment to their advantage. It's not just blind rage. It's rage guided by a cunning mind. Vulnerabilities. Fortunately, they exist. Old tales aren't always wrong, though they often exaggerate. Silver. It doesn't kill instantly like in B-movies, but contact with silver causes severe chemical burns in lycanthropes, cellular intoxication, and most importantly, it inhibits, slows, or even completely blocks their regenerative abilities at the point of contact. That's why our standard ammunition against them has a core or jacket of pure silver. Aconite, aka wolf's bane. A plant extremely toxic to lycanthropes even in microdoses. We use highly concentrated aconitine extracts in our tranquilizers and special munitions. High-intensity ultraviolet radiation, their hypersensitive eyes tolerate it poorly. A bright UV flash causes intense pain, disorientation, and temporary blindness. And of course the old reliable method, massive traumatic amputation of the head or complete destruction of the central nervous system and heart. Works flawlessly against anyone, if you can get close enough and have the right tool. The analyzer beeped, displaying the results. Preliminary data confirmed, lycanthropy. Genetic markers matched several known strains, but unique sequences were also present. The specific type was unclear, but the aggression level, judging by the hormone profile in the saliva sample, was off the charts. The track comparison yielded no matches, meaning this was a new individual not previously encountered. Thorne, who had just returned to the van, leaned over the holographic city map loaded on the central computer with me. Based on the attack location and probable direction of movement, judging by a few smeared tracks leading towards the park, we started estimating its likely route. The nearest large park, Oak Creek, was the perfect hunting ground and hiding place. It also contained old abandoned drainage tunnels and several derelict warehouses on the park's edge. These were the most likely spots for its next appearance or lair. We hadn't even finished forecasting when the radio crackled again. This time it wasn't the dispatcher, but a direct call from a patrol frequency that broke through the filters. Screams, panic, fragments of phrases. "In the park? God, it's huge. Shoot it. Need help. Ah!" The connection died. Thorn looked at me grimly. He's not wasting time. Coming straight through like a tank. Looks like the hunt is in full swing. He walked over to the weapon rack. "Time to gear up fully, Chen. This bastard's decided to have a buffet. Time to shut it down." My hands automatically reached for my tactical vest and holster. Analysis complete. The hunt was beginning. Prepping for direct contact with a lycanthrope at shock is a ritual honed by years of trial, error, and loss. We couldn't afford to underestimate the enemy. Thorn began methodically rechecking his arsenal, silent but with unnerving precision, and I followed suit. The atmosphere in the van thickened. The quiet hum of equipment now seemed like an ominous soundtrack to the impending slaughter. First, weapons. We swapped the standard magazines in our service pistols, my Glock 21, Thorn's beloved Sig Sauer P220, both chambered in .45 ACP, for special ones loaded with silver core hollow points. Maximum tissue damage with simultaneous delivery of the allergen right on target, as Thorn liked to cynically comment, snapping a magazine into place. Then the shotguns. His Remington and my Benelli M4 were loaded with alternating rounds, heavy silver buckshot for maximum stopping power at close range, and special explosive flashbang rounds with a UV charge. On impact with the target or a hard surface, such a round delivered not only a deafening bang, but also a powerful burst of ultraviolet light capable of disorienting and blinding the creature for precious seconds. I additionally grabbed a Scar H tactical rifle, configured for heavy .308 Winchester silver bullets, equipped with thermal and night vision scopes, just in case we needed to engage from a distance or penetrate particularly thick hide. Next came the special gear. Several pneumatic injectors resembling futuristic pistols loaded with vials of concentrated aconitine solution mixed with colloidal silver ions. "Won't kill it instantly unless you hit the heart," Thorn explained, checking the pressure canisters. "But land a good shot in a large muscle mass. It'll buy us a couple of minutes advantage. Slow it down, mess with its breathing." We each took 2 powerful tactical flashlights with switchable modes, regular beam and intense UV spectrum. Several flashbang grenades, modified with a UV component for dual effect. For the absolute last resort, we had the net woven from reinforced Kevlar with thick silver thread embedded throughout. Heavy, cumbersome, but capable of holding even an enraged werewolf if deployed correctly. Thorn habitually checked the edge of his old combat knife with its massive silver-coated blade. "Sometimes you gotta get close, Chen. Too close." I preferred not to dwell on those sometimes. Protection. Over standard Class 4 military body armor, we donned lightweight but durable fire-resistant tactical suits. Under the vests, we had a special lining, a thin mesh of synthetic fiber with a dense silver coating over the neck, chest, and major arteries in the arms and legs. Not a panacea, of course. It wouldn't save you from a direct bite or claw strike, but it could offer a chance of survival from a glancing wound by causing burns to the creature and slowing the spread of infection if it was transmitted via saliva or blood. The plan was simple and risky. Based on the movement trajectory and the last call from the park, the creature was moving deeper, likely towards the abandoned industrial complex on its northern edge, where the old service tunnels and collectors began. It was a logical escape route or hiding place. We decided to set an ambush on one of the wide avenues leading to this complex. the only relatively open space on its presumed path. Thorn, with his shotgun and close-quarters combat experience, would be the anvil, meeting the creature head-on, attempting to stop or at least slow it. I, with the rifle and greater mobility, played the role of the hammer, flanking or coming from the rear, cutting off escape routes and driving it towards Thorn's fire, or finishing it from a distance if the opportunity arose. We left the van concealed in thick bushes near the park entrance and moved deeper on foot. The night around us seemed to thicken, becoming dense and hostile. Shadows from the old oaks seemed unnaturally long and alive. Every rustle of leaves underfoot, every snap of a dry twig made us jump and grip our weapons tighter. The familiar sounds of the night city, the distant hum of traffic, a siren wailing somewhere on the outskirts, mixed with the loud thudding of my own heart in my ears. I checked and rechecked the radio on my helmet, the safety on my rifle, the flashlight mount. Adrenaline mingled with fear, creating a toxic cocktail of tension in my blood. We took positions. Thorn sheltered behind the massive concrete base of an old statue, while I settled into the shadow of a dense thicket about 150 feet away, with a good field of fire covering the avenue. Silence. A minute passed, then two. Only the rustle of wind in the treetops overhead and my own ragged breathing were audible. Nerves were stretched taut. And then the silence was shattered by a low, guttural growl. It came from the darkness to Thorn's left, very close. A sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Animalistic, full of hatred and hunger. The next moment, in the gap between the trees, two yellow eyes flashed, burning with malevolent fire. It was here. The hunt had entered its final stage. Ours, or its, remained to be seen. A second of tense silence, and the shadow literally burst from the undergrowth. This wasn't the wolf from fairy tales or even horror movies. This was something wrong. A huge, hunched figure, only vaguely retaining humanoid proportions beneath matted gray-brown fur. Disproportionately long, gnarled limbs ending in horrific claws capable, as we'd already seen, of tearing steel. A powerful, elongated muzzle with rows of razor-sharp teeth dripping dark saliva. Yellow eyes burned with madness and hunger. And the speed. God, the speed was unreal. It moved not by running, but in leaps and bounds, covering distance with terrifying swiftness, like a distorted, nightmarish spring. Thorn reacted first. The roar of his Remington tore through the night's silence. A charge of silver buckshot hit the creature in the chest and left shoulder. The impact was forceful enough to spin the monster around and knock it off its feet. It hit the ground with a dull thud, but before I could catch my breath, it was already back on its feet, roaring in pain and fury. Dark patches spread on its fur where the buckshot hit, but it seemed almost unaware of the wounds. Regeneration in action. I raised my rifle, caught the flailing figure in the scope, fired. The heavy point, .308 caliber silver bullet struck true, hitting the thigh. The creature howled, a piercing, soul-chilling sound, a mix of pain and animal rage, and started limping. But it didn't stop it. If anything, it seemed only to enrage it further. Ignoring me, it charged straight at Thorn, who was just reloading his shotgun. The chaos of close combat began. Thorn managed to fire once more, almost point blank, but the creature was already on him. The monster's roar mingled with the blasts of gunfire, the screech of claws on the concrete statue Thorn tried to use for cover, his curses. I saw a huge clawed paw flash through the air, and Thorn flew sideways, hitting his back hard against a tree trunk. The shotgun flew from his hands, landing several feet away. The creature paused over the downed partner for a moment, then spun sharply. Its burning yellow eyes locked onto me. It had scented new, more accessible prey. There were 100 feet of open ground between us. A split second to decide. The rifle was too cumbersome for this distance and the enemy's speed. I drew my Glock. A rapid series of shots. .45 ACP with a silver core, a powerful round, but the creature seemed oblivious to the hits. It staggered under the impact of bullets to its chest and abdomen but continued its charge, closing the distance with horrifying speed. 50 feet. 40. I could see its bared fangs, smell the wave of stench, wet dog, blood, and something else, putrid. Last chance. The aconite injector. I dropped the pistol, which was useless now against this death machine, and lunged forward, simultaneously drawing the injector from my belt. The creature leaped. Its massive form loomed over me, claws flashing inches from my face. At that exact moment, as it was midair, I lunged and forcefully plunged the injector's needle into its massive thigh, squeezing the trigger. The tranquilizer, aconite and silver-based, doesn't work instantly, especially on such mass and with that insane regeneration. But it works. The creature crashed down on me with its full weight, pinning me to the ground. I felt its hot, fetid breath on my face. Saw its maw ready to clamp down on my throat. Claws tore my suit at the shoulder, searing the skin. The world narrowed to yellow eyes full of hatred and sharp teeth, but then its movements became sluggish. The growl turned into a wheeze. Its eyes began to cloud over, losing focus. It tried to lift its head for one last bite, but lacked the strength. Its body went limp and it collapsed heavily beside me, pinning my leg. For several seconds, I just lay there, stunned, breathing hard, trying to process that I was still alive. Adrenaline burned everything inside, leaving only emptiness and a tremor running through my body. Nearby, Thorn groaned. He was slowly getting to his feet, limping, clutching his side. He retrieved his shotgun and walked over, looking down at the motionless bulk beside me. "You okay, Chen?" he asked hoarsely. "Gonna live, I think," I forced out. We stared at the vanquished monster, and then the creepiest part began. The fur on the creature's body started to slowly retract as if melting away. Bones cracked, reshaping with a sickening wet crunch. The muzzle shortened. Facial features emerged through the beastly mask. Within a minute, lying on the ground in a pool of his own blood and filth, was a naked man in his mid-30s. Pale, covered in wounds from our bullets and buckshot, the injector needle sticking out of his thigh. He was unconscious, or dead. His pulse was weak but present. The tranquilizer had worked. He was alive, for now. The silence after the battle felt deafening, unnatural. Thorn and I exchanged a look. The most dangerous part was over. But the job wasn't finished. The dirtiest part was just beginning. Checking his vitals confirmed target neutralized but alive. Pulse weak, breathing shallow. The aconitine and the shock of transformation had done their job. Protocol dictated that live lycanthropes should be brought back to base for study whenever possible if the risk wasn't excessive. This specimen was too valuable to simply terminate. A newbie, possibly key to understanding the recent surge in activity. Thorn nodded to himself and retrieved heavy sedatives and special restraints with silver inserts from his kit. While he dealt with the patient, I began the routine but necessary sanitation procedure. It was familiar, almost mechanical work, allowing me to detach slightly from the horror experienced. First, evidence collection, not ours. All our casings, especially the silver ones, were meticulously gathered using a magnetic retriever. Every fragment, every trace of our presence had to disappear. Then, processing the battle site. I got a sprayer with a special chemical agent from the van. Thick foam covered the pools of blood, the signs of struggle on the ground and concrete. Within minutes, it would neutralize all biomaterials, blood, saliva, tissue, turning them into a harmless, rapidly evaporating residue. I carefully treated the areas with the deepest claw marks on the statue and asphalt to hide their unnatural origin. Covering tracks is an art shock agent's master. We needed to leave enough normal evidence for the official investigation, but remove everything pointing to the true nature of events. Meanwhile, Thorne finished securing the subject. The werewolf, now looking like an ordinary, albeit heavily injured man, was safely packaged in a special impermeable transport bag made of reinforced polymer. We loaded him into the van, into a specially equipped compartment. Then Thorne contacted our cover team via the encrypted channel. His voice was steady and businesslike as he dictated the final version of events for the official report that would land on a regular detective's desk. Assault on Patrol Unit 307 committed by an unknown individual, presumed to be in a state of narcotic psychosis induced by a new synthetic stimulant. Suspect offered violent resistance using an edged weapon, possibly improvised, inflicted severe injuries on officer name of deceased cop, whereabouts of second officer name of missing cop, unknown, search underway. Suspect was neutralized by the responding task force, our fake FBI cover using non-lethal special munitions, and apprehended. Signs of struggle and blood found at the scene, along with tracks resembling large predator prints. Possibly a puma escaped from an illegal menagerie. Case transferred to the appropriate division for further investigation. Blah, blah, blah. Standard, well-rehearsed lies. A bitter necessity. The missing cop would likely never be found. Or they'd find what was left of him, somewhere in the tunnels, and attribute it to an accident, or the actions of our crazed drug addict. We drove back to base in the pre-dawn twilight. The city was slowly waking up, unaware of the battle waged overnight in one of its quiet parks. The van hung heavy with the smell of gunpowder, blood, antiseptic, and a faint, lingering musky odor of the beast that seemed to have soaked into the upholstery itself. We were silent. Words weren't needed. We both knew the cost of this night. The price. One cop's life, another's ruined fate, and another heavy scar on our own souls. I sat in my seat, watching the houses drift by the window. I looked at my hands in their tactical gloves. No blood was visible, but I felt its phantom stickiness, its metallic taste in my mouth. This job burned you out from the inside, leaving emptiness and cynicism. Every case, every encounter with the darkness chipped away a piece of your soul. I remembered the face of the man the monster had become back in the park. Distorted by pain, fear, incomprehension. Who was he before his life turned into this nightmare? Had he managed to hurt anyone before encountering the patrol? These questions would remain unanswered. To us, he was now subject. Lycanthrope Delta, a specimen for study. Back at base, as I was removing my gear and preparing to write the detailed internal report, I felt a sharp pain in my left forearm. I rolled up the sleeve of my suit. The fabric was torn. 3 parallel, deep scratches were bleeding. The creature's claws had reached me after all, in the final seconds of the fight. When did that happen? In the heat of battle, I hadn't even noticed. I cleaned the wound and generously doused it with concentrated silver antiseptic from the standard shock medkit. The pain intensified, but it was the right kind of pain, the silver doing its job, cauterizing any potential contagion. But the scratch throbbed strangely, and deep within my consciousness, an unpleasant cold worry began to stir. An accident, or... I tried to push the thought away. Paranoia is an occupational hazard at Shock. Chapter 2. Ocularis. The night after the park was long, not in terms of hours. Adrenaline burned time, turning it into a thick, viscous substance. We returned to base, our sterile, cold-lit bunker beneath one of the city's nondescript administrative buildings. Here, far from the blood and howling, order reigned, servers hummed, and the air smelled of ozone from the ventilation systems and faint antiseptic. The contrast with the primal chaos we had just sanitized was almost physically palpable. Thorne and I sat in the debriefing room, filling out preliminary reports. Or rather, I was filling them out. Thorne was silently cleaning his modified Remington, his face an impenetrable mask of fatigue and old anger. My forearm under the bandage itched unbearably. The scratch from the lycanthrope's claws, sustained in the final seconds of the fight, seemed to have a life of its own. I tried to ignore it. The silence was broken by a sharp, demanding signal over the dedicated shock line. Not a general code black, but a specific request. Shock consultation, urgent. Code aberration Gamma, Ironside Docks area. Gamma meant something biological but extremely strange, not fitting known patterns, requiring immediate expert assessment, meaning us. The dispatcher, whose voice was tense but steady, like someone reading a battlefield report, outlined the situation. Over the last 3 hours, 4 identical attacks had occurred in the Port District. All victims were found alive but in a state of profound shock, almost catatonic, and all of them were missing both eyeballs. Thorne stopped fiddling with his shotgun and looked up. His brow furrowed. Rips out eyes and leaves them alive. What the hell? A psycho with tweezers? Some cult ritual? He spat into the waste bin. I was already at the terminal running the query through our vast and nightmarish database. There were cases of ritual mutilation, entities that fed on life force or fear, leaving victims drained but intact. But this modus operandi, precise removal of eyes without lethal outcome, had never been encountered. The strangeness didn't end there. The dispatcher added details from the first responders. There was almost no blood at the scenes, certainly not as much as expected from such trauma. The edges of the victim's wounds were described as unnaturally smooth, almost cauterized, and no signs of struggle. The victims were just sitting or lying where found, with empty sockets staring at nothing. Unresponsive. Completely. 15 minutes later, our inconspicuous armored van was speeding towards Ironside Docks. The Port District greeted us with its usual oppressive atmosphere. Rusted skeletons of dock cranes against a leaden night sky. Dark hulks of warehouses, narrow, broken streets squeezed between brick walls, smelling of salt, fish, and decay. A patrol car's flashing lights indicated the latest incident, in one of the darkest, most secluded alleys. Regular cops held the perimeter, their faces paler than usual, trying not to look deeper into the alley. We passed under the tape, flashing our fake federal badges. The scene was sterilely horrifying. A middle-aged man, judging by his work clothes, a dock worker, sat on the dirty cobblestones, leaning back against a grimy wall. His head was tilted back, a thin trickle of saliva ran from his open mouth, and his eyes. The sockets were empty. Just 2 dark, perfectly round voids in his face. It was wrong. There were no ragged edges, no bruising, none of the expected mess. The wound edges were smooth, slightly shiny, as if cauterized by a laser, and almost no blood, just a few dark drops on his jacket collar and the cobblestones beneath him. He didn't move, didn't breathe, or rather he did, but so shallowly and evenly his chest barely rose. Absolute emptiness in the gaze that wasn't there. I pulled out our field kit. The EMF detector showed weak, fading fluctuations around the victim, as if something had just been here and vanished. The thermal scanner registered a localized temperature drop of a few degrees directly in front of the victim. But the anomaly was rapidly dissipating. No signs of struggle, no prints, no casings, nothing. But then I switched on the UV scanner and saw it. On the cobblestones, starting right at the victim's feet and leading in a thin, intermittent line towards the nearest storm drain grate, was a faintly glowing trail. It shimmered with a faint, iridescent light, like an oil slick on water, but had a viscous, slimy consistency. I'd never seen anything like it. It didn't match any known chemical or biological agent in our database. From the storm drain grate emanated a faint but distinct and very strange odor, a sharp note of ozone, like after a thunderstorm mixed with acrid ammonia and something subtly sweetish putrid. Thorne, who had been checking the addresses of the previous 3 attacks via radio, came over. "All 4 locations, Chen," he said quietly, looking at the glowing trail, "within a 3-block radius. And each one near a manhole or grate, either storm drain or sewer." He nodded towards the grate emitting the strange smell and where the slimy trail led. "He's not walking the streets, he's crawling out from underground." He looked at me and there was no doubt in his eyes, only grim determination. "Looks like our surgeon isn't a surgeon at all, and maybe not human. Gear up for a descent. We're going into that shit." The night was no longer just the aftermath of a battle. It promised a plunge into a new, unexplored darkness, literally. The return to the van was brief and businesslike. The task was now clear: find the source of the anomaly in the labyrinth beneath the city. Standard gear, body armor, silver-loaded pistols, shotguns remained, but over it we began donning specialized equipment for working in hazardous environments. Sealed biohazard suits, Class 4B, heavy, cumbersome, but necessary. Zipping up and pulling on the helmet with its integrated comms and air filtration system, I felt like an astronaut preparing for a spacewalk into hostile vacuum. Only instead of vacuum, miasma and an unknown biological threat awaited us. Comms check, oxygen supply check from the tanks on our backs. The world outside became muffled, my own breathing deafeningly loud inside the helmet. We augmented our arsenal. Besides powerful multispectral flashlights, white light, UV, IR, I took an ultrasound scanner to detect movement in murky water or behind obstacles, and an experimental sprayer with cryofoam. If the creature was indeed amorphous, freezing might slow or even immobilize it. Thorne, true to his love for loud solutions, grabbed a portable acoustic emitter. "Don't know if this slime has ears," he grumbled, checking the device's charge. "But the right frequency can ruin anyone's day." Plus, of course, sample containers and a field analyzer. We found an inconspicuous cast iron manhole cover a couple of blocks from the last attack site, away from prying eyes. With a screech of rusted metal, it yielded to Thorne's pry bar. A wave of concentrated stench hit us, a mix of sewage, rotting garbage, chemicals, and that same ozone ammonia smell, now unbearably strong. We switched on our helmet lights and began the descent down slippery, rusty rungs. The world above vanished. We were in a realm of darkness, dampness, and echoes. Flashlight beams snatched from the gloom slimy brick walls covered in years of grime, a churning flow of murky gray water at the bottom, and myriad red pinpricks, the eyes of rats, squeaking and scattering from the light in our approach. The air was heavy, humid, Breathing it without the filtration system would be not just unpleasant, but dangerous. Every step echoed loudly. Every rustle made us tense up. Claustrophobia pressed in from all sides despite the relatively wide tunnel. Switching the flashlights to UV spectrum, we saw it immediately. The iridescent slime. Down here the trail was much clearer. It ran along the wall, roughly at human height, an intermittent but confident line leading deeper into the system. In places, it dripped onto the floor, leaving shimmering puddles. We followed the trail slowly and cautiously. I went first, constantly scanning the space ahead with the ultrasound sensor. Thorne covered our rear, his shotgun ready. The EMF detector on my wrist showed an unstable but steadily increasing background of anomalous activity. Several times the US scanner beeped, indicating movement ahead, but it turned out to be large clumps of debris floating in the water or particularly large swarms of rats. The tension mounted. Along the way, we found more evidence of the creature's passage. A scrap of light-colored fabric snagged on a protrusion. A lone woman's shoe, half submerged in the muck near the water's edge. And then, something new. Embedded in one of the slime blobs on the wall were strange shards. Translucent, chitinous, with a pearlescent sheen, they were sharp and hard to the touch. I carefully collected several samples. Nothing like them existed in the shock database, and the slime itself was becoming more abundant. Now it wasn't just trails, but entire sheets covering sections of walls and ceiling. Thin, translucent filaments hung from some, trembling slightly, as if alive in our flashlight beams, and the sounds changed. Added to the constant gurgle of water and squeaking of rodents was something else. A quiet, rhythmic, wet slapping or chewing sound coming from somewhere up ahead in the tunnel, and whispers. Not real whispers, but distorted echoes that my brain desperately tried to assemble into something meaningful, resulting only in eerie gibberish. The EMF detectors screamed, needles pegged. The air temperature dropped sharply, steam plumed from our mouths, visible even through the helmet visors. We were close. The tunnel opened into a vast, echoing space, an old collector node where several flows converged, and what we saw made us freeze. Everything here was covered in it. Pulsating, iridescent slime. It coated the walls in a thick, undulating layer, hung from the high ceiling in disgusting, trembling stalactites. In the center of the chamber, on a sort of podium made of compressed trash, silt, and it seemed bones, loomed something. Or rather, it was embedded in the wall opposite. A collection, hundreds of human eyes. They were fused into the translucent, gelatinous mass covering the wall, and they stared at us. Some were fresh, clear, others cloudy, milky, in various stages of decay. They formed a horrific mosaic pattern of empty gazes. The air here was so thick with ozone and ammonia it stung even through the filters. And then the silence was broken by a loud, wet, sucking sound. It came from somewhere above. One of the dark shadows on the slime-coated ceiling began to move. It detached from the main mass, but didn't fall. It floated downwards, smoothly and silently like a jellyfish in water. A formless, iridescent mass of slime, churning and changing shape before our eyes. It was here, right above us. And it had noticed us. The creature, which we later codenamed Ocularis in the reports, defied simple description. Imagine a huge amoeba the size of a small van, woven from pearlescent, translucent slime, constantly churning and shifting form. Within its gelatinous body, dark, writhing cords, like nerve fibers or the roots of some alien plant, were visible. From the main body, pseudopods of varying lengths and thin, whip-like tentacles were constantly extruded and retracted. But the most terrifying part wasn't that. Inside this quivering mass, like gruesome ornaments, floated eyes. Dozens of eyes stolen from its victims. They rotated, focused on us, tracked our every move. It had no face, no mouth, no limbs in the conventional sense. Only these stolen, dead windows to souls serving as its sensory organs, its entire amorphous being radiated waves of hungry, predatory attention, felt almost physically. It attacked without warning. Sliding across the ceiling with unnatural grace, it plunged downwards. Several thick tentacles lashed through the air. One struck the brick wall next to Thorn with such force that fragments sprayed. The impact point immediately hissed, bubbled and frothed with yellowish foam. The slime was incredibly corrosive. Thorn, without hesitation, raised his shotgun. The blast echoed thunderously in the confined space of the collector. Heavy silver buckshot tore through the gelatinous body, leaving ragged holes. The creature spasmed, but the holes immediately began to close, pulsating. Slower than the lycanthrope, but still too fast. And then it made a sound. Not a roar, not a screech, it was a blow to the brain. A high-frequency mental wave that made ears ring even through sealed helmets and caused white spots to flash before the eyes for a moment. "Light! Give it light!" I yelled, fighting down nausea. I aimed the beam of my powerful flashlight, switched to maximum UV, directly into the center of the churning mass. The creature reacted instantly. It recoiled, its body shimmering brighter as if ignited from within, steam rising from it. The surface slime bubbled. Apparently ultraviolet light caused it intense pain. Thorn also activated his UV flashlight. Caught in the crossfire of beams, the creature darted around the collector, sliding along walls and ceiling, trying to escape the irradiation zone. It attempted to circle around us, flowing onto the opposite wall. "Freeze it!" Thorn barked. I raised the cryosprayer. Aiming at the main mass, I pulled the trigger. A thick stream of white icy fog hit the target. The slime hissed, became coated in a thick layer of frost. The part hit by the cryogen solidified, became brittle and began to crack. Several large pieces broke off and fell into the murky water with dull thuds. This clearly slowed the creature, its movements becoming more viscous, but it was still dangerous. And then it deployed its primary tool. From its very center, from the tangle of internal cords, shot a razor-thin, almost invisible tentacle. It moved with lightning speed, and its tip bore something like a small suction cup studded with microscopic gleaming teeth. It flew straight at my face, aiming precisely for my right eye through the helmet's protective visor. Cold terror paralyzed me for a split second. I instinctively jerked back, stumbled, and fell to one knee. In that instant, Thorn, possessing the reflexes of an old predator, stepped forward and slashed at the flying tentacle with his silver-bladed combat knife. The blade passed clean through. The severed tip of the tentacle fell to the concrete floor, twitched, and quickly dissolved into a hissing, smoking puddle of ammoniac liquid. Losing its tool enraged the creature. It shrieked its mental scream, cracking the glass of our helmets, and lunged straight at Thorn, ignoring the flashlight beams. Thorn was ready. He dropped his flashlight and drew the acoustic emitter. Aiming it at the approaching mass, he hit the button. The collector filled with a deep, low-frequency hum that vibrated the floor beneath our feet. And it seemed the very bones inside our bodies. The effect on Ocularis was immediate and devastating. The creature began to convulse violently. Its amorphous form started losing stability, the slime rippling like water about to boil. The embedded eyes rolled randomly. It was completely disoriented. "Now! The core!" I shouted, getting back to my feet and hitting the creature again with the UV beam and cryofoam stream. Thorn stepped almost point blank to the writhing mass and aiming for the densest part where some central node could be discerned, emptied the rest of his shotgun's magazine into it. Silver buckshot at that range had the effect of an explosion inside the gelatinous body. Simultaneously, my focused UV beam and icy stream hit the same spot. The combination of silver, extreme ultraviolet, cold, and acoustic assault proved fatal. The creature emitted a final, fading mental groan that sounded like a sigh of relief. Its body twitched convulsively one last time. The slime began to rapidly darken, cloud over, lose structure. It slumped, disintegrating into a pool of thick, black, bubbling ooze, releasing clouds of acrid gas. The embedded eyes, one by one, tumbled out of the decaying mass and fell with soft plops into the spreading filth. Within a minute, it was over. A deafening silence descended on the collector, broken only by our own heavy, ragged breathing into the helmet mics and the steady dripping of water from the ceiling. On the floor, where the nightmarish creature had just thrashed, a pool of noxious black sludge now slowly spread, in which dozens of human eyes floated like grotesque bobbers. And opposite, across the chamber, the wall still watched us, a horrific, motionless collection of hundreds of empty, glassy stares. We had won. But the feeling of revulsion and profound existential dread was almost unbearable. This wasn't just a victory over a monster. It was an encounter with something so alien and wrong that reality itself felt cracked. First things first, self-check. I was intact, just shaky, my suit splattered with vile slime. Thorn grimaced, examining his suit sleeve, where the tentacle had grazed him before he severed it. The fabric was smoking, eaten away by acid. It would be a nasty burn, even through the protective layer. "Another souvenir," he grumbled. But there was no anger in his voice, only infinite exhaustion. We quickly, almost mechanically, collected samples of the ocularis remains, chunks of semi-dissolved slime, the chitinous shards, air and water samples from the collector, into sterile containers. The lab back at base would have to try and figure out what this damn thing was and where it came from, though I doubted we'd like the answer. Contacting base via secure channel, I reported the threat neutralized using code phrases. Requested a sanitation team per protocol Bioform Sigma. Full sterilization of the contact zone with an unknown biological entity. While waiting for them, we stood before it. The wall of eyes. Hundreds of pairs of glassy, motionless orbs stared at us from the solidifying pearlescent mass. Blue, brown, green, gray. Fresh and cloudy, wide with terror or calm like sleepers. What to do with them? The thought felt almost sacrilegious. They couldn't be returned. Leaving them here was impossible. Shock protocol was ruthless and unambiguous. All anomalous biological artifacts, especially like these, must be completely destroyed. Prevent further contamination, unforeseen consequences, panic, should this ever surface. Soon they arrived, faceless figures in heavy, cumbersome hazmat suits resembling robots. The shock sanitation team. They worked silently, quickly, and efficiently, their movements honed by hundreds of similar cleanups. First, treating the entire collector surface with powerful chemical neutralizers, turning residual slime and biomaterials into inert foam. Then, the most gruesome part, collecting the collection. I watched as the masked workers used special tools like scoops and scrapers to detach the eyes from the solidified mass and drop them into heavy lead biocontainers. The sound of eyeballs dropping into a metal container, that's something that will stay with me forever. Repulsively mundane and monstrously wrong, I turned away. While the sterilization work continued below, I contacted the surface, requesting updated information on the victims. The news was grim. All 4 were stable, transported to a specialized clinic under our control. Physically, apart from the missing eyes, their condition was satisfactory. But mentally, they were empty. The catatonia persisted. Doctors were baffled, minimal brain activity, no response to external stimuli, as if someone had switched off the light inside. Was stealing eyes just a way for Ocularis to feed, or something more? Maybe this creature fed not on flesh, but on consciousness, personality, leaving only empty shells behind? We would never know for sure. The victims likely wouldn't return. Their fate: a quiet decline in a ward under the care of doctors unaware of the true cause of their condition. Another line item under collateral damage in our report. I watched the impersonal work of the cleanup team. This wasn't our first encounter with the inexplicable and alien. But this creature, its methods were so intimately horrific. Eyes, windows to the soul. To lose them like that, to be turned into a will-less puppet. A chill ran down my spine again. I caught myself blinking more often, touching the skin around my own eyes. Hundreds of empty gazes from the collector wall were seared onto the retina of my consciousness. We returned to base just before dawn. The city slept, oblivious to the battles fought beneath its sidewalks. Thorne headed to the medbay. The doctor needed to treat his chemical burn. Another scar, a physical reminder that our work leaves marks beyond the soul. I sat down at my terminal, opening the report form. My fingers moved habitually across the keyboard, filling in the fields. Threat type: unidentified amorphous predatory bioform. Codename: Ocularis. Source presumed Ironside Docks sewer system. Threat level 7 elevated. Status: neutralized. Threat contained and eliminated. Collateral damage: 4 units, irreversible psychophysical damage. Dry, sterile formulations hiding an abyss of revulsion and existential horror. I rubbed my tired eyes, closed them for a moment, but the darkness immediately filled with them. Hundreds of empty, glassy eyes staring from the depths of the sewer. The job was done. The border held. But the city beneath us felt even deeper, darker, and more full of hidden nightmares than before. And the scratch on my forearm, left by the lycanthrope's claw, started itching again. Dull, insistent, like a quiet reminder that darkness doesn't only come from outside. Sometimes it waits for its chance within.